Hi, this is Mark at learnhowtogarden.com, and in today's episode of the 10-Minute Gardener we're in Betty's garden and we're continuing our series of planting perennial vegetables. If you're not already subscribed to us at Learn How to Garden, there is a link below this video. If you just hop over there, give us your email address, that's all it costs. We can keep you up to date every time we put a new film up, and it also means that you get our monthly newsletter. As we've talked about before, the reason my mom is starting to plant more and more perennial vegetables are they take less time, less effort, they tend to be stronger, and once they're in the ground it means that because she only wants to spend a small amount of time in her vegetable garden, they're working for her and she's not having to sort of re-sow them and cultivate the land, or the ground I should say, each year. And the one we've come to now is this little beauty here. Now this is rhubarb, and most of you are sitting there saying, well, rhubarb's not a vegetable. Well, in fact, yes it is. Rhubarb is a vegetable, but we tend to sort of use it more as a fruit. You know, we use it as a dessert, but it's the same way that tomato is actually a fruit, but we tend to sort of use that in our cooking. So I think we're justified in saying rhubarb should be one of the perennial vegetables. And rhubarb's brilliant because it's one of those things that once you've got it in will grow quite happily with not a lot of attention. You know, if you keep it weed free, you mulch it really well each year, you can, like sea kale, force it. And what forcing means is just covering this basically with a either a forcer. There used to be sea kale and rhubarb forcers made, and you still can buy them, which is like a terracotta pot upside down which you put a lid on. And what happens is you leave the lid off to draw the plant up, then you pop the lid on to blanch those stems, and by forcing something you make it much tenderer, you get it earlier in the year. And we're going to be planting two varieties of rhubarb. One is Victoria, and that's quite an old variety, comes slightly later in the year and is really sort of tasty and brilliant for desserts. So we're going to plant this one, and this is Timperley Early, and it does what it says on the tin, it's early, and this is the variety that we'll be planting to force. We bought the crown. Rhubarb actually grows from a crown, and what's in here is like a solid crown, similar to what you would see on an iris or something like an agapanthus, you know, that you can feel it's quite hard. And it likes very well constructed soil. So what you want to do, because it's a perennial and it's going in for a long time, is get a lot of garden compost or a lot of well-rotted manure into the ground. My mom has never been able to grow rhubarb in her garden, so what we actually did in this small space that's next to the compost heap, so it's a piece of space that's not really doing anything in the garden, I double dug this, took away the top spit of soil, and I've replaced that with a mixture of garden compost, well-rotted manure and soil, and sort of worked it all back in together to create a really rich fine tilth. And when you plant rhubarb, it's very important to remember that you don't bury the crown. So we'll pop a hole in here, and if you've sort of done this right, it's quite easy really to get this sort of hole prepped out. And you might think, why isn't he standing up to dig? Well, it's just easy for filming if I continued to kneel down really. You take the rhubarb crown out of its pot, and if we look here you can see it's got a really nice root system, and that goes into the hole, and we backfill with this really rich soil, but we don't cover the crown. And once we've backfilled, we're then going to take some more compost out of the compost heap, and we're going to put a layer of 2 or 3 inches all the way around here to build it up, but again leaving the crown out. You don't want to cover that crown. And we're also going to add some calcified seaweed. People, when you read about it, it says rhubarb likes an alkaline soil between 6 and 6.8 as a pH, and I think if you're new to gardening, it's a bit confusing because anything below 7 is an acid. So when we talk about liking alkaline conditions in gardening. It's relative. It means it's closer to 7 rather than sort of below 6. So it's not actually sort of an alkaline soil, but it's more alkaline. Now you can either use dolomite lime, which organic gardeners would use, or calcified seaweed, which I'm a big fan of, which will do a very, very similar job for you. So we've firmed the crown in with our fingers, and then, like I say, we're going to put a really generous mulch of the compost out of the compost bin in. If you can come in here, a good sign of your compost is 1, if it's friable, and 2, if you've got loads and loads of these tiny little pink things. You can probably hardly see them, and they're compost worms. The more worms you've got in your soil, the better your soil is going to be. What the worms do is they put lots of channels through your soil, so you get lots of air in your soil, lots of aeration, you get a much better growing environment. And one of the reasons we use a lot of compost and we use a lot of manures is to increase the activity in our soil. Good soil, great vegetables. And once it's mulched, we leave it. If you're going to get a really severe frost, you could cover this with some leaves or some bracken or just some fleece to protect it. And although it looks a big space, rhubarb need at least 3 feet around them to grow. They're a big plant. As a child, I used to sort of hide in the rhubarb patch at the top of my granddad's garden. It was a bit like a sort of Indian camp, well, Native American camp, sorry, I'm very politically incorrect there. But that's what it used to be. I played cowboys and Indians. And it's a big, beautiful plant. Remember, it's the stems you're growing it for. You can't eat the leaves, they're toxic, they're not poisonous, but they will make you feel quite poorly. They have oxalic acid in them. It's also why if you've got stems growing and they have a frost and the stems go slightly soft and mulchy, throw it in your compost bin, because again that will then draw the oxalic acid into the stem from the leaves and it will make you quite poorly if you eat it. Dead easy to grow, very few problems, lots of varieties out there, worth its place in your vegetable garden, although of course rhubarb crumble is that classic that we all remember from our childhood. So that's another one of our perennial vegetables that we're growing, and if you are finding you've got less and less time, then this is the way to go, I think. And while we're just sort of over near the compost heap, these are the broad beans that we popped in October. As you can see, they're coming up, looking quite okay. We've got a couple of spaces here, but we still have time to pop a couple more of those in, so I'm quite happy with those. If you are watching this any time up to sort of mid to the end of November, you've still got time to put your broad beans in. So that's Mark at Learn How to Garden saying thanks a lot for watching. Get out there, buy some rhubarb, put it in a space that you're not doing anything with. It will be quite happy.